Namaskar, all of you. Today we are in the fifth session. Today I want to add something to yamas and niyamas, which we discussed last time. The moral ethical principles come to work while we are in social reference. And therefore, as I said, yoga is not having any social reference. You are totally individualized, personalized, inwardly. Then where is the field for practicing morality, ethicality, which is something on the plane of behavior? That's the face value of a person. When we refer to morality, ethicality, that is the face value of a person. We really don't need face value while we are in spiritual practices, adhyatmic practices, yogic practices. Then the other point is, usually we all claim that we are morally, ethically strong compared to someone else. So we have this relativity concept in morality, ethicality. With regards to others, we are critical and we tend to assess them in their morality and ethicality, while we deem ourselves that we are morally, ethically strong. The morality and ethicality, these aspects. One more thing to understand here, that if you are not committing himsa, that doesn't mean that you are in ahimsa. If you are not indulging in asatya, it doesn't mean that you are in satya. Like if somebody is not a bad person, it doesn't mean he is a good person. Or if somebody is not a good person, that doesn't mean he is a bad person. A good person must be a good person. Good person will be a good person and a bad person will be a bad person. Not being bad is not being good. Not being good is not being bad. So not being unethical, there is no ground to claim that you are ethical. Not being immoral, there is no ground for you to claim that you are moral, that you are in morality. Morality is morality, ethicality is ethicality. Unethicality is unethicality. Not in unethicality doesn't mean that you are ethical. Not being immoral, it doesn't mean that you are moral. Like somebody not ugly doesn't mean the person is handsome or beautiful. Somebody not beautiful doesn't mean the person is ugly. So with respect to these moral ethical principles, we have to understand this one more perspective there, dimension there. Now, if we claim that we are practicing ahimsa, satya, asteya, somebody might be a good person and therefore we say he is in ahimsa. He is in satya. He doesn't take recourse to asatya, doesn't take recourse to himsa, doesn't take recourse to antagonizers. But one more point to reinforce the earlier statement that Patanjali is not dealing with moral ethical principles but ethico-religious principles. Why is it? Suppose we are practicing ahimsa. If we think we are in ahimsa and we don't indulge in himsa, we are not, definitely not in a vow of ahimsa. If somebody is a good person, the person has not taken a vow to be good. The person is merely good. If a person is a noble person, the person is noble because he is noble. It's not that the person has taken vow of nobility. Whereas Patanjali immediately embarks upon the topic of vratas, called vows. Either atomic vows or great vows. That is why there is dharma in his 5 principles or 10 principles he appointed as niyamas. There is something like wow. It is not just practicing satya, practicing ahimsa, practicing brahmacharya, practicing asteya, practicing shaucha, practicing santosha, tapa, etc. It's not just practice. If you are practicing, that is not sufficient, and that is not what Patanjali is mentioning. He expects that to be a vrata. Vrata means vow. That is how it is rendered into English, which doesn't have proper connotation, filtering down to language of English. Vrata is a unique concept in the Sanatana Dharma. Vratas have a greater prowess and power. Vrata have a cultural ambience, cultural sublimity, whereby one is able to be in a vrata. Because vratas are dharmic practices. So, why it is acharniti dharma? Because Patanjali immediately embarks upon vrata, and vrata only comes in dharma. Vrata doesn't come in morality, ethicality. The moral people, ethical people are not necessarily in the vrata. They need to make it a vrata. Those observances must be coming under the framework of vrata. That is what is expected. So that's why Patanjali mentions vratas immediately in the topic of yama niyamas. Either there is anuvrata or mahavrata. We should be going by anuvrata, not try to venture into mahavrata. We must be taking atomic vows, and those can be certainly practiced. Atomic vows can be practiced. Great vows cannot be practiced. So that's why he has suggested vows is the topic of yamas and niyamas. And therefore there is some dharma aspect, dharmic aspect. Because outside dharma we don't have to take vratas. Again, let me tell you, vrata doesn't have an English word. There are only vows. Vows are taken out of resoluteness. Vrata is taken out of some dharmic practices. That is why these are achara, niti, dharma practices, aspects. And that's why they are not moral ethical practices. So even in the 28th sutra of Ashtanga Yoga, he says, yogangaanushthanat, anushthanam. Anusthana is again a word which cannot be rendered into English. Many of them have rendered as a reverential practice. That doesn't carry the connotation properly. Anushtana comes only in karma. There is karma anushthan, there is jnana anushthan, there is mantra anushthan, and there is yoga anushthan. Today we are not aware of yoga anushthan. We are aware of only yoga practices. We think this is something to be practiced, and we don't give any framework of anushtana, whereas Patanjali in his text speaks of anushtana when it comes to ashtanga yoga. Yogangaanushthanat. He doesn't say yoganga practisat. He doesn't say yoganga sadhanat. So these are all earlier steps we have to take. Before going for anushtana, we'll have to go through other preparatories, other stages, such as practices, sadhanas, disciplines, etc. So yama niyamas are coming in anushtana, therefore there is dharma. Anushtana is the term which is only in dharma, karma, jnana, mantra and yoga. So that is another kind of point which I am putting forward for you to understand that these are not moral, ethical principles. Now going to the next topic. Before going to the next topic, I was posed a question, and that's a very important question, vital question. I want to deal with it. Because today people are fascinated to be doing yoga and meditation. Meditation has become a fashion. So much so that even in the medicos are prescribing meditation for certain problems. Coronary management, they say there must be some meditation done. Stress management, they speak of meditation. So people are trying to go for meditation. Everyone wants to go for meditation. The strange thing is that everyone wants to get meditation. Everyone wants to try and get meditation. No one wants to know what is meditation. This is a very strange scenario. When you have such an intent to go for meditation, why is it that one is not trying to understand what is meditation? The question put to me was that Guruji often said that his yoga is dynamic meditation. Nobody questioned how yoga is meditation, the asanas or IyengarYoga that is being practiced, how it can be a dynamic meditation. Because usually meditation means one imagines sitting quiet, relaxed, and then closing the eyes and doing something as meditation. So everybody wants to make an attempt for meditation, but it is important that we must know what is meditation. Meditation is a psychological, psycho-mental act. At the outset, let me tell you, I am not talking about dhyana. Meditation is not dhyana. Dhyana is a wider concept. Meditation is a component of it. Meditation is a part of it. Meditation is a facet of it. We should not equate meditation with dhyana. Dhyana has a wider scope. Anyway, people are not interested today in dhyana. They are all interested in meditation, particularly the Western world, which has come into the fold of yoga. Dhyana is not familiar term for them, and they have been told that dhyana is a meditation, and therefore they are going for meditation. They want to go for meditation. Let me try to give out little explanation about what meditation is. Meditation is a psychological, psycho-mental act. It is of the brain, it is in the brain, it is from the brain, it is by the brain, it is of the brain. That is why it is a psychological, psycho-mental process. Now, that means meditation will always have a thought. You can't be having no thought and then go for meditation. Absolute thoughtlessness will not be meditation. It is something else, which Patanjali speaks about, chitta vritti nirodha. In case the mind is restrained, chitta is restrained, it's a different state. Meditation is, however, not bereft of a thought. Now, usually, we worldly people only know about a thought, and then we are in thinking. We think, and then there is a thought. Keep thinking, we have a thought. We keep on thinking, we have a thought. We have thoughts. Thoughts come and go. Thoughts have inward, outward movements. Thoughts arrive, thoughts depart. So there is traffic of thoughts going on. So while the thoughts are on, even in our mundane state, worldly state, awakeful state, the thoughts are on. But then meditation is something different. The point is there is always a thought, and then we keep thinking. Now meditation can take place, which is a thought process, which is a thinking process. It can take place in only particular realms. Any thought matter, any thought content doesn't qualify to go for meditative state. Every thought will not culminate in meditative state. There are only few thoughts, sublime thoughts, transcendent thoughts. We require suitable thought matter for going to meditative state. So meditativity depends upon the thought. How transcendent the thought is, how noble the thought is, how virtuous the thought is. Any thought cannot land in meditativity. So when there is a thought, there is invariably thinking. When there is a thinking, there is a thinker. So there is a triad which constitutes the process of our thought. It may be non-meditative thought or it could be meditative thought. There will be invariably a thinker, and there will be thinking, and there will be a thought. Now we worldly people are merely used to have thinking around a thought. We have a thought and we go on thinking, we go on thinking, we go on thinking. So there is always thinking about a thought. This will never land us in meditative state. What is meditation then? When there is this tripartite constitution that there is a thinker, there is thinking, and there is a thought. Understand these? The inflections of the word. It's one word having three inflections. Thinker, thinking, and a thought. Now we are only used to having a thinking process on a thought. We never have a thinking process on thinking. Now it is essential that there is a thinking process about very thinking. There is a thinking process about very thinker. So we'll have to find a thought, not only in a thought, but we'll have to find a thought in thinking. We'll have to find a thought in thinker. So just around a thought, if you go on hovering with thinking, it will not be meditativity. So we'll have to get used to a process. Today the meditation has been suggested, any Tom, Dick and Harry suggests, and we think we should embark upon meditation. Now listen carefully to what I say now. So there is a thinker, there is thinking, there is a thought. Don't just think about the thought. Don't just keep thinking about a thought, we must also investigate the very thought. What is this thought? Why is this thought needed? From where the thought has come? What is the subject matter of the thought? What is the realm of the thought? We must have some investigation about the thought. So thought must be thought about. There will be thought about the thought as to why this thought came, from where did it come, how did it come, what was the agency through which I got the thought, what is the purpose of the thought, should I keep thinking on this thought, is it worthwhile to be thinking on this thought. So the thought must be under scrutiny. This is implied in meditativity. Have a scrutiny of your thought. Is this thought of anything good to me? Should I continue to be having a thought in my mind, this thought in my mind, or should I do away with the thought? Is the thought harmful, or is the thought helpful, nourishing, helping me to get involved? So there should be a thought about thought. There should be a thought about a thought. There should be thinking about very thought. Rather than just thinking and having a thought in thinking, then let there be a thought. What is the thought content, thought container, thought resource, thought source, subject of thought, subject matter of thought, purpose of thought, worth of thought, value of thought. You will not like to be thinking on something that once you are convinced that it is worthless to have a thought about. You will not engage yourself in a thought when once you realize it is worthless to be thinking on it, or it is disturbing me, or it is agonizing me, annoying me. You will not continue to encourage the thought. So there should be scrutiny about the thought. So there should be thought about the thought, and not just thinking on the thought. Thought about the thought is a component of meditativity. Then thought about thinking. How am I thinking? Why am I thinking? What are the tools which I am using for thinking? Because behind your thinking, when you are having a thinking, there is perception, there is cognition, there is sensation, there are memories, there are other inputs, there are experiences. So they will all be constituting the thinking process. If they are not there, then the thinking process will not be constituted. So one needs to investigate about very thinking. How the thinking is taking place, what is the data supporting my thinking, what is underlying my thinking. As I just now said, there will be perceptions. You will have perceptions, you will have cognitions, you will have sensations, you will have memories, then you will have experiences. All these things constitute the thinking process. So we must have a thought on thinking. Now that's a component of meditativity. Why am I thinking? How am I thinking? How should I be thinking? How should I not be thinking? When should I be thinking? When should I not be thinking? Because a thought is a good thought, thinking is a good process, but sometimes the place is not right. Time is not right. So we'll have to have a scrutiny. Is it right time to have thinking on it? Is it right time to have thinking on a thought, particular thought? Is it right time, space, situation, scenario? Objectively, we'll have to look at this. Not just keep on thinking, keep on thinking, keep on thinking. Is it right time to think about it? Think it might be worthwhile to be thinking about, but maybe the time, space, situation may not be right. So we have to objectify this. Is it the right time, space, situation, scenario for me to be thinking on this thought? So there must be a thought about thinking. Then should be a thought about thinker. What is the state of the thinker? Am I in a proper state of mind to be having thoughtfulness or thinking process? Am I vexed? Am I tormented? Am I angry? Do I have prejudices? There is no point in having thought process when you have prejudices about that particular thing. So we will have to also investigate the thinker. Is the thinker in right frame of mind to think about that thought there and then? Is the thinker in proper state of mind? Is the thinker in proper profile? Is it a proper profile to be thoughtful? If it is a vexed condition, tormenting condition, agonizing condition, or erupted condition with some malice, prejudices, etc., then that's not the right time to be thinking. The thinker should not be thinking then. The thinker should start becoming a thinker at another point in time, knowing that I am not in right state of mind. So meditativity primarily means having a thought about thinker. A thought about thinking. This is so important. And also some thought about very thought. Rather than just thinking and thinking and thinking. Because if you don't analyze the thoughts, some thoughts have a stress potential, tension potential, stress potential, anxiety potential, worry potential, tormentation potential. So these are the thoughts. You want to wean away from such thoughts because they are vexing your mind. The thought must be analyzed. Thought must be scrutinized. Similarly, thinking should be scrutinized, and the thinker should be under scrutiny. So thinking about thinker is a meditative component. Thinking about the thinker rather than thinking about a thought. Then thinking about the thinking is a meditative component rather than usual worldly process of merely having thinking process and a thought object. So you will realize that for meditativity, you will have to select a proper thought object or thought content. Any thought content cannot be leading you to meditativity. So there must be filtration about the thought. The thought must be suitable. Then the thinking process should be scrutinized so that will be evolved, that will be set right, that will be tuned, fine-tuned, and the thinker. So in short, if I have to just give a definition of meditation, primarily it is of the nature of a thought on thinker, thought on thinking at the second stage, and thought about the thought. So evolvement will take place in the reverse manner. Thought about the thought about thinking, thought about thinker. So that is a culminative phase. That is a reflective phase. The thinker should be known. The thinker should be objectified. Thinker should be assessed. Thinker should be investigated. thinker should be under scrutiny. And yogic subject matter is the best subject matter to be going for meditativity. Now, why Guruji called his process, his yoga, as dynamic meditation? Let me clarify here. IyengarYoga is not dynamic meditation. Iyengar's yoga was dynamic meditation. So we Iyengar students should not be complacent, thinking that we are doing IyengarYoga and IyengarYoga is dynamic meditation. It was his yoga which was meditation. Because yogasanas are a wonderful condition to enter into the academy of meditativity. Where there is a body set addressal, there is a breath set addressal, there is a mind set addressal. The subjective entity is set right. Object, the asanas are set right. Instrumental entities are set right. So in an asanic rendition, classically, there is a subjective entity. There is an objective entity. There is an instrumental entity. Sometimes the subjective entity comes on the anvil. This was happening to Guruji in his practices. He was not just trying to perfect his Shirshasana. He was getting his subjective entity on the anvil, on the operation table, and carve, sculpt, culture the subjective entity. So he would objectify the subjective entity. That is called witnessivity, auto-witnessing, self-witnessivity. So in his yoga, he was having auto-witnessivity. And therefore he would set right his subjective entity. Whereas we have mistaken the process and we just go on correcting our Shirshasana. We go on correcting our Sarvangasana. We go on correcting our Trikonasana. But we don't try to get corrected ourselves in a subjective profile. Whereas that is the implication of an asana. So Guruji would be doing that. That any asana there will be a thought process. Now this is an adhyatmic thought process. Usually for us, a thought object or thinking process, there is some external element coming in. Whereas in yoga, there is no external element coming in. The two are doing that are all integral to oneself. So there is something called as karma kriya, something called as jnana kriya, something called as dhyana kriya in yoga sanas. So Guruji would not just have his asana under scrutiny, but he would have his instrument under scrutiny. What is the point in doing a perfect Shirshasana for sight? By hook or crook. So instrumentation should be proper. So that should be under scrutiny. How am I doing? How the instruments are being used? Are they justifiably used? Are they properly used? We just want to do an asana perfectly. We don't bother about the instruments of it. Because we think asana is a posture is a spectacular thing and spectacle. And we try to work on an asana as a spectacle. We don't bother about what we do inside. We don't bother about the processes. We want to just perfect an asana. Guruji would have thought process on instruments. Guruji would have a thought process on subjective entity. Because in meditativity you get reflections. That is why in higher faculty functions, the process is tensivity, reflectivity, meditativity. If there is no reflectivity and no reflection, you can't meditate. So you don't meditate on a thought, you meditate on a reflection of a thought. You meditate on reflectivity. If there is no reflectivity, you can't meditate. Pensivity should be there. So these are higher faculty functions. That's why I said at the outset that these are psychological, psychomental processes. Meditativity is out of pensivity, reflectivity, meditativity. But we have messed up in our understanding. We think first we must concentrate. The concentration leads to meditation, is what is our notion, idea. And that's why we have the triad of concentration, meditation, trance. That is not right. That is faulty. Concentration will never give you meditativity. Concentration is always on an object. Can you imagine concentration with no sensory object? You must have a sensory object to concentrate. With no sensory object, you can't concentrate. So concentration is psychosensory. That is why the education is important. To have proper crystallizations. So, concentration is psychosensory. That will escalate into a state, higher state. Concentration and absorption. Concentration, involvement, and then absorption. You can get absorbed in a sensory object. So we have wrongly brought in meditation as a link because of mistaken translation of dharana, dhyan, samadhi as concentration, meditation, trance. Dharana is not concentration. Dhyana is not, in that sense, meditation. Samadhi, in that sense, is not trance. So they happen in psychomental realm, progressively. And we have brought meditation as a link, which is faulty, which is the blunder. Where does meditation come? It comes in higher faculty functions, pensivity, reflectivity, meditativity. So for meditativity, there must be reflectivity. So object must be reflection worthy. If the object is not reflection worthy, you can't go to meditativity. And this pensivity, reflectivity, and meditativity are churned out by the process of thought process, which I just now told you. Thought, thinking, thinker. Identify them, classify them, recognize them. Then, what is the churning here? The thought about the thought. Thought about the thought. Thought about thinking. Thought about thinker. Then again thought about the thought about thinker, thought about thinking. Again thought about the thought about thinking, thought about thinker. So this circular process, rotary process, does the churning. And the reflectivity is evolved, meditativity is evolved out of this journey. Only point to be noted here from the educative perspective dimension, that meditativity doesn't come from concentration. You don't need concentration to be meditative. You need a good, noble object, suitable object for thought to be moving around it. Every object is not worthwhile to be going for meditativity. Then you must go for dissection of thinker, thinking, thought. If I may say so, trisection. The trisection of thought, thinking and thinker. Identify each one of them. Objectify each one of them. Analyze each one of them. Investigate each one of them. Scrutinize each one of them. And then cyclically go on doing it, it will land up in meditation. So, how Guruji's yoga was a dynamic meditative process or meditation, because he was dealing with his core to periphery, periphery to core aspects. All aspects of me and mine coming as objective entities, instrumental entities and subjective entities. And that is why there was thought about thinking and there was thought about thinker. That is why it was a meditative process. So Guruji was not just perfecting asanas, but he was trying to carve, sculpt, also address, set right the instrumental entities and subjective entities. That is why there was meditativity in his asanas. Now, how will you embark upon this process in your practices? In your practices, try to understand the syntax which I said last time. I am doing Trikonasana. Trikonasana is being done. Trikonasana is being done on me. Trikonasana is done by the breath and by the mind. Trikonasana is done for the breath and for the mind. I am doing Trikonasana. Trikonasana is done on me. So this classical process will bring on horizon the meditativity in your process. You will start understanding how an asana can be a meditative state. See, in asanas we go for a state of mind. And a state of mind is always a thought pattern. You can't have a good state of mind with no thought pattern, scheme of thoughts, arrangement of thought, content of thought. There must be there behind the state of your mind. So in natural, organic, yogic processes, a state of mind has always a thought pattern underlying it. And there is a thought structure raised over it. Only in inorganic process you can have a state of mind without a thought substrate. Like if you swallow a psychedelic pill, psychedelic drug, you don't need a thought scheme for you to have that a psychedelic state. The drug will do that. That is inorganic process. That is unnatural process. In yoga, you work on your state of mind very naturally, very organically, very autogenically. So bear in mind there is always a thought pattern, thought scheme, thought arrangement behind that state of mind. Shirshasana is not a psychedelic pill or Shavasana is not a psychedelic pill that you get that state, sublime state. It is autogenically turned out, biochemically turned out, electrochemically turned out. So there is always a thought process. That's why in asanas, I have introduced the precept of activity process and thought process. Layman, common man, most of the practitioners also think yoga is activity process and then go overboard on activity process. They don't identify thought process. Bring in thought process, bring it significantly. There will be basis for meditativity. Meditativity doesn't get based on activity. Meditativity gets based on thought. So let's try to improve our thought process in our lives. Let us objectify the thought processes. Let us have scrutiny of the thought processes. Let us try to address the thought processes. Let's try to improve the thought processes. We will certainly be heading towards meditativity and the dynamic meditation of Iyengar system. I think that is enough for the day. Thank you very much for your patience. Namaskar.